Freight is a first-person shooter, where the player uses a revolver and a sword to slay zombies in infested zones in the city. The player belongs to a group of survivors who use an old freight train as transport. The player is a runner. Their job is to jump off the train at areas of interest and scavenge what they can find. What you are going to see would be the first level in a series of campaign-style single-player missions. Pipeline was used to create the sword. First, I used Maya to create the mesh of the sword and unwrap the model. Once textured in Substance, I exported to Unreal. I recorded camera motion using Camtrack. This can be exported from Blender as an FBX onto an Unreal camera. First, I recorded a video of myself. I uploaded this video to Deepmotion. This animation can be imported into Unreal and retargeted for using MetaHumans. I used LiveLink to record the motion of my face, which can be saved using Unreal Take Recorder, along with my voice using a phone mic. After downloading a MetaHuman from Bridge and importing the audio of my voice, I have an intro cutscene. I'm gonna do a dance. oh, wow. Oh, I love to dance. ah, wee, oh. Other tools used are Procreate, which was used to create plans for the various UI menus in the game. Blender was used to create custom animations for the player character and for the revolver, and Audacity, which was used to remove unwanted parts of audio and apply different effects, such as an effect which makes the voice sound like it's coming through a radio. First, I collected an image board of old abandoned buildings and factories, along with a document detailing the game world. Next, I created the main level. The character model, along with some animations, was sourced from Mixamo. The project was versioned on Git. I added code to spawn a particle system at the point of impact. The footstep shoots a raycast down from the player every time a footstep is needed to be played. This allows me to access the last material slot, which may be one of these materials. If so, I play the corresponding footstep sound. I noticed steep parts of the auto landscape material were rock and others were grass, so I modified the footstep code to also check the angle of the floor under the player when on a landscape to determine if a grass or rock sound should be played. Learning from the theory of a vignette shader presented in this video, I created a vignette shader. Material instances of the material can be made to tweak parameters of the shader. The shader works by finding the distance from the pixel to the center of the screen and colouring further away pixels darker. I created a shader to help find zombies. The shader outlines zombies when they are behind another object. I used this tutorial to create the shader. The shader first finds the edges of zombies based on the depth of the pixels around the current pixel and colours the edges if the zombie is obstructed by something. I created a custom tool to be used with Blender to create procedural assets. I followed this tutorial on creating a rock generator using geometry nodes and a shader. I used the documentation to create the skeleton of the add-on. I used this add-on to convert geonodes and shaders to code to be used in the add-on. Finally, I added code to decimate the mesh to a reasonable poly count. This tool can be easily packaged and distributed. The main optimization I made is using LODs, so I would only have to use higher poly meshes when needed. I also moved code out of the tick function and into a timer. Story and lore has shifted over development. After the zombie apocalypse, the population lives in safe zones scattered around the world. Due to their wealth before the apocalypse, only the biggest corporations were able to hold on to power. All the major corporations are now militarized, and the corporations pay mercenaries to raid the exclusion zones outside of the safe zones for supplies. However, this story changed. The corporations and safe zones were removed, and instead the game now follows a group of survivors who use an old freight train as transport. In the current game market, there are very few zombie games which are small and easily digestible. This game aims to solve this. The story is simple to understand and the game can be played as its own experience in about 8 minutes. I enjoy the gameplay of shooters which emphasise movement such as Titanfall and Doom, therefore I emphasised movement in my game too. I enjoy the gameplay of Doom as it encourages swapping weapons frequently. This is why I added the combo system and the 2 weapons to my game. The first thing that I started creating were the gameplay mechanics. First I made a sprint mechanic, next I made a mantle mechanic. When the player's collision component fires, the blueprint fires a raycast down to determine if the collision was with the floor. If the collision was with the floor, then do not mount them. Otherwise, if the player is holding jump and the actor the player is colliding with isn't the last actor the player collided with, then increase the jump counter, jump, and reduce the jump counter by 1. The final movement mechanic I made was the ability for the player to wall run. After a wall run, the player is able to do an additional jump in the air. The wall run works by shooting 2 short raycasts, one either side of the player. The camera is tilted left or right and the jump function is called. Every 0.2 seconds, 2 raycasts are performed to the sides of the player. If both don't collide with anything, then end the wall run. Next, I added the ability for the player to attack. The player has 2 weapons they can attack with, the revolver and the sword. These weapons are their own actors which both implement a weapons interface. This allows the player script to call attack on the current equipped weapon and the weapon actor will take care of the rest. To encourage the player to use different weapons, I added a combo system. When the player spawns, a combo tree is made. A combo tree is a series of combo nodes. Leaf nodes have a score. As the player attacks, they will move through the combo tree. I added animations to the character. This was done using an animation blueprint and blend spaces. Here is the animation blueprint. From the entry point, the blueprint defaults to the idle state. If the player is moving, then the first person blend space is used, which uses the player's velocity to drive the blend space containing idle, walk and run animations. When the player attacks with the sword animation is played. If the player shoots with the revolver, the shoot animation is played. Blend spaces are used to play the sword and revolver attack animations. This allows the program to store different attack animations. This value in the current combo node is used to drive the blend space. This animation was bespokely made in Blender. The hit animation is played as a response to a collision between the sword and the zombie. A behaviour tree is used to control the behaviours of the zombie. Here is the behaviour tree. To save data between different levels, I used a game instance, as the game will need to save the user's login details in order to push new high scores to the database. Light shafts were enabled on the directional light. As for settings added to the post-process volume, I added film grain, lens flare and a grind mask along with manually setting the exposure amount. As for physics, I added some rocks at the end of the second section. When the player shoots the rocks, they become physically simulated and roll away, allowing the player to pass through to the next part of the game. As you can see, the game is playable using a controller. Here is the control scheme for the game. The game has many UI screens, including a death screen, end card, loading screen, login screen, main menu, player UI, splash screen and a selected difficulty screen. The game is able to store data on players who create an account. This includes username, hashed passwords and high score of the player. This system is composed of 3 parts, the database, a server and a client. First, I developed the system to work locally and then moved everything online. To create the system locally, I used XAMPP to run the database, which also allows me to use my PHP admin to create and manage the database. Here's the database I created. I wrote the server code in Visual Studio Code and ran it using Node. I followed this tutorial to learn how to create a server which queries a database using Express and MySQL. Here's the final code for the server. I hosted the database on myfreesql.net, I hosted the server code on Render, and I created a repository to store the server code on GitHub so that Render can connect to the repository. Finally, I followed this tutorial to add C++ code to my project and send HTTP requests to the server. I made this system so it can be used in my blueprints. Here is the final game mode blueprint. Please enjoy some gameplay of the finished game.
Okay, you're up. Remember, it's a simple snatch and grab. Get in, get out, and don't get beat. No need to go sightseeing this time. Radio us when you're done, or swing by to pick you up. You're a runner, remember? So run. Be fast and decisive, and help stay alive. Good luck out there.